Hello, I'm Ben.
And I'm Cami.
And welcome to our new channel.
Everyone belongs.
And I wanted to make this video look all different and special, but it's not. It's still just us. This channel, we're gonna be focusing more on talking about our belief system and some of those things behind it. Some of you guys know our story that we've been involved in. And the summary of that is this summer, we were planning on going to a Bible camp in Washington that we grew up at. We were planning on driving across the country and we had our house all rented out and we were gonna volunteer and cook there for 1 week. This is a camp we grew up at literally every year of my life. I've been there.
And mine.
It's where we met.
When we were 14.
And it's where we've taken our kids and where we meet a lot of family and friends. So our entire kind of summer got rearranged and canceled, and actually our kids are at that camp now. But what we wanted to do for this episode is to talk about what our thoughts are on the actual beliefs behind this type of exclusion, why we think it's dangerous, why we think it's unique, and what we would like to see addressed.
We're primarily going to be responding to a couple comments here. The first comment is from Narak Azil.
That's not a real name, don't worry about it.
Okay. I can kind of understand that it's a place where they want to have their culture to bring their kids up in a certain understanding. Did you tell them you wouldn't mention transgender or gay? I feel like if you don't tell people you are serving waffles to that it's okay to be trans, it should be okay. Maybe they're worried you'll tell that to a kid. If a group of people want to maintain a certain culture, it has to be exclusive. Don't you always talk about how their culture sucks? Maybe they don't want people like that coming in. It has nothing to do with hate. It's about maintaining their culture. And I think that's what they meant when they were saying that they love you. Think of the Amish. Imagine you felt entitled to attend all Amish gatherings and you openly talked about how the Amish are an unhealthy culture and they are wrong about everything. I wouldn't be shocked or offended if you were excluded. They'll do them over there and you do over here. I know it's harder because it's what you grew up with, but you are outsiders now. People think of tolerance as only accepting gay trans, but what about the tolerance to accept a group to have their own culture that they don't want infiltrated and changed?
There was a lot of comments kind of along this vein that were very simply asking the question, well, don't they have the right, or doesn't any group have the right to exclude and kind of create boundaries so that they can operate however they want to operate? And I think that's a really good question, and that's what we're going to answer. Before we do, though, I think we forgot to mention why we were excluded from this opportunity this year. And it was very specifically because we were told on the phone that we do not believe it is a sin to be transsexual or gay anymore. And they found this out from the internet, from one of our other videos, and we go into all these stories like in way more depth on our other channel, so if you want that backstory, you can check that out. But that's what we were told. First, I want to address something that kind of irks me about this comment. It says, don't you always talk about how their culture sucks? No, I don't think we do, but that doesn't mean we agree with the entire culture. There's some veins in the culture that we think are destructive and have caused damage to us, and we think are causing damage to other people. But that doesn't mean we think the culture sucks. In fact, if we thought the culture sucks, I don't think we would drive our family 3,000 miles across the country to volunteer there for a week, to cook there and be a part of these people's lives and what they're doing. So I don't think it's as black and white as that. Now, this person asking this question is asking what's wrong with a group of people like the Amish or anyone that says, hey, we just want to live our life this way and you don't fit in, so you should go out there. Do you have a problem with that? And personally, I don't have a problem with cultures or groups that want to be exclusive. I think it's actually very normal and very natural and appropriate. I'll give you a few examples. Like when you play for the Reds baseball team, you have to follow the rules to play on the team. Like you can't show up wearing a Seattle jersey to the Reds team and be like, hey, I belong, I can do whatever I want. Like they get to create the requirements for their rule. If you want to be a part of a knitting club, I'm fine with knitting clubs that want to say, hey, if you have to be a part of our knitting club, you have to like knit and be between the ages of 45 and 50 and be a female and
45 and 50.
and not drink alcohol. Like, great. Like, if you create a group, I'm fine with you creating whatever rules that you want to for your group. But that being said, there's a couple things that are actually more unique about religious groups kicking people out. And it's not that I don't think they should be allowed to do it, but I think there's some things that are good to talk through about what is so different about a church from a knitting club or a baseball team or Boy Scouts or an elementary school or whatever it is. And the first thing we've noticed is that when you're kicked out of a church, the exclusion is actually somewhat uniquely condemning. They're not saying, hey, we're the Reds, you can be the Mariners, and that's okay, like we're just on different baseball teams. Or hey, we knit and you don't knit, but it's okay to be either, like it doesn't really matter. What they're saying is, we are good enough to be on the inside, we are saved, we have a certain level of a belief that high enough or makes us good enough, and you don't. And that's why you can't be in here. So you actually have to be outside until you actually change enough to be good enough to be on the inside. The other problem I have with specifically the phone call we get, and something that I've heard a lot, is that when we were excluded, we were told that it was being done out of our best interest. Because if we were going to have the opportunity to repent and change our belief system, we kind of needed to have this kind of like pain of not being a part of the group so that we could change, so that we could be back in the group. And it comes across as being like they're doing it for our best interests. But I've been kicked out of a lot of places in my life, mostly casinos and other places. And when the Reds kick you out for not wearing a Reds uniform, or if you work at Google and someone from Facebook shows up and asks for all your secrets, or the baseball team, they don't tell you that they're doing it for your best interest. They're very upfront and they say, we're doing it for our best interest. We're protecting ourselves. We're protecting the core of our group, our knitting group. And I think that's fine. Like I said, they can be honest about that and just say that. A lot of times with the churches, they're not honest about that. They don't say we're doing this to protect ourselves. They say we're doing it to love you.
Well, and this love is a particular brand of love, and it's you, when you're in this inside group, you have this burden to save everyone. So if someone falls out of, say, the saved mentality or belief system, then you have this burden that you got to help them get back instead of just letting them go.
The final thing I want to say about what makes religious exclusion unique, in the case of the knitting club, when you exclude someone, oftentimes you don't really have an agenda to try and send a message to other people. You're really just trying to protect the group and the activity. What I've noticed about religious groups is when you exclude someone, there's a message that's kind of sent to everyone, both outside and especially inside the group. And that message is, if you get out of line, or if you believe this, or more importantly, if you say that you believe this, or you start talking about these activities openly, which actually quite a few people do, or, you know, I've even found from other people at this camp that there's other people that believe the same thing we do, even on staff, but they don't feel like they can talk about it. So what the message that's sent is, when we're publicly excluded for not anything that we did, but just for something that we believe, it kind of sends a message of repression to those that are still inside the group about how they're allowed to evolve and change and include people. When we were excluded from this group and the way that it happened, it wasn't surprising to us. And we're very familiar with this belief system, which I would categorize as evangelical Christianity. And what I've noticed, both from my time inside the system and being kicked out of the system a number of times, is it's very condescending to people outside of the system.
But it's not openly condescending.
No.
And that's what I more have a problem with. It's not openly condescending. It's packaged with, oh, we're just trying to love everyone. But there's a superiority belief that we actually have the truth, you don't, and we're therefore better people than you, that I actually think is not unique at all. I mean, there's probably lots of people who think the Reds are better than the Cubs, and if you're a Cub fan, you're an idiot or whatever. But at least they're pretty open about that. When people talk about that, they're like, yeah, I think the Reds are way better. But it'd be hard to find someone who just says, oh yeah, being an evangelical Christian is way better than being a Mormon.
In fact, they say the opposite. They say, oh, I don't think I'm better than you, which should be a red flag anytime someone has to say that many times.
Yeah. So if they would just own it and say, yeah, we actually think we are better than other people. We found the golden egg. We found the golden truth. And we have the market on that. And you don't.
And they say these phrases that are, it's almost like coded. It's like, we'll pray for you. It's like, save the lost, or we're saved. And of course, there's all this other lingo about how, oh, it's not me, like God did it. But the way that, if you look at the actions and if you don't look at the words, and that's been what's key for me.
To stay sane.
Yeah, because if you listen to the words, it drives you crazy because they're like, well, they say they love me and they say that they're doing what's best for me. And they say that they see me as an equal. But conversationally, like after serving at this camp for close to 20 years, it's funny that when someone's belief change, in any other realm, it'd be normal to say, oh, we used to believe the same thing for the last 20 or 30 years. Mm-hmm. What did you learn that caused you to change? In our experience in the religious circles, this would never, ever, ever, ever happen. Because changing beliefs is never viewed as evolution. It's only seen as like rebellion, backsliding, falling away, getting tainted by lies, or something negative like that.
And I feel like I can speak confidently on the superiority thing and the condemnation thing is because I felt this. Like I felt superior to people who were lost and they didn't have the truth. And I would never have thought I was being condescending, but now that I'm outside of that, I've been treated this way, like I do feel it. I feel it. And I know those other people who have felt it too aren't crazy.
Yeah. And when you're raised in an environment where your belief is everything, so who we were, like we even called ourselves believers, and we're like, are you a believer or non-believer?
Non-believer, yeah.
When someone changes their beliefs, they change their status as a human. And when I start talking to a non-believer as a believer, I put on like a little like missional project hat. Like, oh, my goal is to convert you. I'm not going to listen to you. I'm not going to dialogue with you as an equal. I'm not going to come to you for spiritual ideas of any type. Mm-hmm. They basically become a project. And what I noticed is as soon as this person found out that our belief system shifted, we switched into that category.
It was also something that would come up in conversations all the time, like race, almost like, oh, was that person black or white? Or it would just, so instead of that, it would be, oh, was that person a believer? Which really just meant, like, did they ascribe to these set of beliefs?
So to just translate some of these thoughts into a real world example, I want to ask the question, what would it be like if in another group you're excluded not for what you do, but for what you believe? And that's what makes this a little bit unique. Because if I was in a tennis group, like a normal group, and they said, hey, to be in this group, you need to play tennis, and you need to pay your fees, and you need to dress like this and act like this, but show up at the tennis court.
Great.
Perfect, let's play tennis. But imagine if they said, okay, not only do you have to play tennis, but you have to hate racquetball. You have to think racquetball is stupid in order to play tennis.
Or inferior.
Yeah, people would be like, what? Like, that's crazy. That's not what tennis is about.
But my dad plays racquetball.
So when the emphasis is not on an actual behavior, but it's actually on a belief system, you start to see that there's nothing you can do. There's no amount of like rules you can follow to actually be included in these clubs. If you're maybe specifically a male or white or seen as someone who has a voice or power, and you have these certain beliefs, or if you choose to just talk about them openly, your very presence starts to become very threatening, even if you're not doing anything. So this brings us back to the question, well, maybe they're just like protecting their kids from us at this camp. They want to surround their kids and not expose them to these ideas. I understand that, because I think that was a very similar way to how we started off protecting our kids.
Which I would have been fine with signing something for that week that you won't talk to any other children other than your own about these beliefs that you have. And I'm like, sure. Like,
Yeah.
I wasn't planning on it, first of all.
I want to reveal this history. Like, while we are outspoken on the internet and we make videos about things, when we go to camp to cook waffles and be in the kitchen, we're just cooking. And we'll stay up late and talk to friends about whatever, but we're not saying, hey, I work here, listen to me. Or if some kid comes to me, I mean, the example that they gave to me on the phone was like, what if some kid like wants to accept Jesus into their heart and they come to you? I wouldn't be comfortable doing that anyways. I'd be go talk to your parents.
Yeah, maybe you need to talk to someone else about that.
Not me.
But I like have no interest, and you can speak for yourself, in trying to convert these people at camp to what I believe. Like, I don't even think that even is a good methodology. I don't think people get converted, like truly get converted. That's something they actually have to choose themselves. Someone else can't push that on them.
So one of the conclusions that I've drawn, and right now I'm speaking mostly to people that are inside of the church or inside of religious communities. It's easy to think that when you're inside the community, people are creating rules that are for your best interests, and they have to do with following a biblical code because they pertain to a certain standard of holiness, righteousness, or purity, or something that involves your spiritual well-being. But what we've learned as we've looked at these trends of who's excluded and why is that it's actually less about your holiness in terms of why people are kicked out. And it more has to do with who is actually threatening to the power structure and the belief system.
Which kind of go hand in hand, power structure and belief system.
Yes, but that's a different topic altogether than your actual purity, your actual righteousness. And for this, I would ask for examples, just examples we have is, we've served at this camp for years and no one's ever asked us these questions. This is not that big of a deal to camp. I know this because they have people working up there this week that believe the same things we do. So if we're actually like bad and we could go around tainting people, or hurting people, then I agree, we should protect people from those that are hurting us. But it's obvious that camp doesn't really believe that this belief is hurting people enough to ask them up front if they believe it, which means they're only kicking you out if you're outspoken about it, which shows what they're really afraid of. And this was really confusing for me because if you actually think this is a matter of following rules or sticking to the rules or sticking to what it says on the website in terms of, who's included or excluded, it's really confusing because at one point I thought that's what it was. And then I realized, this has nothing to do with the rules. There's no amount of rules I could follow and still feel like a part of this thing. I don't think exclusion based on power structures is valuable or beneficial unless you're going to say that's what it is. But if you're going to say that it has to do with following rules, there's two things I think can be done. One is to post the rules clearly and publicly. In this case, put on your website these words: you are not allowed to cook or serve at camp in any way unless you believe that being gay and trans is a sin, and whatever else should go on that list. And I think the burden on this case is on camp to be as specific as possible, because someone in another comment dialogue said, well, they said it on their website. And I looked at their website and it doesn't say that at all. It says something about sexual intimacy within marriage being God's creation, and that marriage is one man and one woman. And I get how there's a little bit of overlap there, but I don't have an opinion on marriage in that way. To me, that's a political thing that I actually don't care about. So for me to say okay, yeah, I could sign off on that, and all they really say, by the way, is that you have to sign off while you're there for the week or, work under that. And then for me to get a phone call out of the blue 2 weeks before our family vacation, I think it's in Bible Camp's best long-term interest for them to put that specifically on their website and be honest and clear. Just like a knitting club would, or just like working at Red Stadium or working at Google or any other institution, it says clearly and specifically. And the second thing I would ask is if it's really that important to you, and if you want to be fair about it, to enforce it universally. To show people what the guidelines are, and then before they cook, to say, hey, do you agree to this? And that kind of protects everyone and ensures that certain people aren't just going to be excluded as a power play.
In this case, certain people are actually being discriminated against because of their personality. If you are outspoken, if you feel like, I want to talk about this, then you're actually going to be the one outed. And someone who has a more, I don't know, just like laid back, I don't feel a need to talk about this kind of personality, but still believes the same things.
They're more compliant.
They're gonna slip under the radar and still cook waffles, which I'm fine with, but I'm not fine with that certain people get discriminated against just because their personality is different.
And it will create an environment that's actually dangerous for true spiritual growth, because it excludes a certain type of person fairly arbitrarily and randomly.
Well, I think it actually serves the power structure by discriminating people who talk about things, because then you're a disruption to the power structure and what they believe. We want to end on a more positive note. So another comment we got was, people in religious circles exclude people because they are afraid or are threatened. It's so hard though. Your experience is sadly more common than it should be. Religious groups and churches all have tripwires. As long as one is docile and compliant, they can exist perpetually inside the system. But as soon as they stand up for something and trip a tripwire, all bets are off. You hit a tripwire that was hidden, and that sucks. It hurts. In the experience I went through, we hit a hidden tripwire as well. When we asked that the leadership announce their decision, the reply is that issue is divisive and we don't lead with that. So they keep it hidden until it jumps up and hurts someone. That isn't loving at all. So this really sucks for your family. I am so sorry.
So that's one of the reasons why we are making this video, is because oftentimes people that share their stories of getting kicked out are seen by those on the inside as being divisive, as causing trouble, when actually I care very much for these people. I care very much for this group. It's why our solution, when they said, you're not allowed here, is to be like, well, fine, we're boycotting you. Our kids are actually still there this week and made the choice to go, to be around these people, and we allowed it. And I would really like to see these issues addressed and dealt with, even though I know it's not convenient for those still inside the circle, because I think it's in the best long-term health of the group. And very simply, my short version of the story was, for a long time I was in the group and I saw people get kicked out. And I always assumed, there's something wrong with those people. Those people are being divisive, and those people, must not have followed the rules and they don't belong here. Well, come to find out, when I get kicked out, I see the people that were removed very differently now. And sometimes they were like really not helpful and really, not following the rules, but sometimes they just didn't fit. And I can see now that by removing them from the group, we actually did a disservice to the whole group that existed and remained by not keeping our eyes open to this issue. So I want to toss out just two other questions that we've been pondering from a religious perspective. And these are the types of things we're going to be asking on this channel. The first one is, if you have to exclude people for your idea or your belief, is it really that powerful of an idea or a belief? If really by us showing up, we're threatening this thing by not even doing anything, but just by believing what we believe, is it possible that that idea or belief is actually fairly weak? And there might be something more true or better out there. And the second thing that we see that we're asking a lot about now, in regards to the first topic of the whole baseball team and the knitting club and the church, is that all church is? Is it really just another club, another social club? And I actually think that that is what it is now. But the question I'd like to ask is that what Jesus, for those of you that believe in him, is that what Jesus really came to set up? Was just another club that excluded just another group of people? And maybe this is just a more robust club with a longer code and it had love tossed in there. Was that what he came to do? And some of the questions we've been asking lately have to do with maybe there's another reason Jesus came. Maybe, and if you look at his life and his example, it didn't seem to really defend those on the inside of a club. So I'm really excited about that type of love, that type of exclusion. We have no hate for Bible camp. We're not trying to blow it up or boycott it or ruin it. But I would love to see these conversations of that more powerful type of love that doesn't feel so easily threatened by other people's beliefs. I would love to see that talked about. And that's what we're going to do on this channel. So stay tuned. Maybe we should say like everyone belongs or something to end it. Is that cheesy?
It is, but I think it's powerful too.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
Ready?
Everyone belongs. We gotta work on that.